Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. This is episode 126 of the Meet the Farmers podcast. My guest today is Chris Clark, who recently moved to Devon. The last time I spoke to Chris was for the Nature Friendly Farming podcast, and he was based then in the Yorkshire Dales, so quite a move. Alongside the farm in Devon, Chris is a farm business consultant, and he's also a former farm tenant and farm manager. He's also a member of the North Yorkshire Rural Commission and the England chair for the Nature Friendly Farming Network. Chris, how are you doing?
Morning, Ben. I'm well. All the better for seeing you.
Well, it's great to see you too. Let's start with the move to Devon. How's it been? And tell us about your new place.
Well, we sold 400 acres in the Yorkshire Dales, and we've bought 40 acres down here. So a big change. We've moved close to family. My father's 93, and the youngest daughter also lives around here as well. So we're much closer to them. They weren't coming to us, so we've moved to them. The move has been good. Difficult getting building works done, but they're happening gradually. We're gradually getting to grips with the 40 acres. We've got a pause site, a plantation, an ancient woodland site on which we're looking for felling license from Forestry Commission has just arrived, and we've got a woodland management plan going in, and we're just beginning to build up a management plan for the grazing going to species-rich meadows.
And for anyone who didn't listen to your NWFN podcast episode, but please do, listeners. Hey, I don't think I've actually done a shout out for that podcast. So that we've done 2 series so far. Me and Will go and head over to the Nature Friendly Farming Network podcast. Check that out. Chris was actually the first ever episode on that, and there's a huge amount in that. Yeah, so in that you were talking about your former farm in Yorkshire. Tell me a bit about that now.
So just under 400 acres. The farmhouse was at 1,200 feet, and the top of the highest the farm went to sort of 1,800, 2,000 feet.
Wow.
And it had, of the 400, about 275, nearly 300 acres were all moss, blanket bog.
Wow.
And so we didn't have much in the valley bottom to generate really huge amounts of hay. So the business planning and the farming management of that was tricky. You may well ask the question, if we'd known what we know now, would we have bought the farm? And the answer probably still is yes, because it was a huge learning experience.
Yeah.
But we went into white-bred shorthorn cattle, which were really good, really friendly, easy to handle, easy calving. And we reduced the number of sheep from nearly 500 of all ages down to less than 100. And then eventually, actually, just as we left, we'd got rid of all the sheep and we're bringing our neighbours' sheep on.
Yep.
We found on our farm, and we found subsequently, that there's not much money in sheep. We also added value to the sheep that we had, the lambs that we had, and we added value to the cattle, turning them into ready meals, making a £1,000 heifer or steer in the market worth 4,500 to 5,200.
Yeah.
Through ready meals, self-catering, B&B. We had an education centre, schools.
Fantastic.
So yeah, and the biodiversity increased and the profits went up.
Yeah. Do you miss it?
There was a huge emotional investment, but I am someone who rather would say I hope than I remember.
Yeah.
So that's in the past. I move on. I'm lucky in some ways that I don't have the generational baggage that goes with generational farming and landowning.
Yeah.
So, and I'm a businessman. That's what drives me at the end of the day. Yeah. Business drives me.
Yeah. Let's go back to your childhood. What was that like? Because I think your parents lived abroad from memory, and you went to boarding school here in the UK.
True. The days post, well, the decade post Second World War, my parents got married, had a honeymoon in Bournemouth, and then my father disappeared off to the colonies without my mother seeing him for a year or two.
Oh, wow.
And that's what happened. And then she, having never, ever left North London, then got on a ship from Tilbury to Dar es Salaam.
Huh.
Never having left London. So, and so I was born in 1956, just on the sort of Tanganyika Kenyan border, and my childhood with two brothers, but younger than me, was around East Africa. We were lucky enough to go on proper safari rather than the sort of safari we get these days, and we had a very outdoor existence. We were free to roam, so to speak. We were free range kids.
Fantastic. And I mean, obviously, you grew up with that interest in the outdoors. Was there any interest in farming at all back then?
None at all.
Or any exposure to farming?
I had no idea. My later childhood, boarding school, was centered entirely around sport.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I did.
Yeah.
Academia was not on my priority list. It's taken me, Ben, probably until I was 28 or 30, perhaps a bit younger, for my brain to mature and start acting sensibly and properly and start thinking about life and where we're going. It took me a long time.
Yeah. So when and how did your own farming journey begin?
Well, we went to agricultural college. I went to agricultural college. My father didn't know quite what I wanted to do, and I didn't know what I wanted to do either. He had relatives that were farming near Royston, in Cambridgeshire.
Yep.
And I ended up going to a farm at Bassingbourne, near Royston, for my pre-college, and then to Seal Hayne. Met my wife then. She wasn't obviously my wife, but we got married subsequently. But before we got married, we decided that we would buy a farm, our own farm, by the time I was 50. And that's what drove every single decision. Wow. For me, not having an objective, not knowing in the morning when I put my feet on the floor, having just got out of bed, that I need to know that what I'm going to do today is going to help me achieve what I want to achieve.
Okay.
And I try and help farms and businesses that I work with to have some sort of goal, because it changes the way you drive your farm business or any other business, in fact.
Yeah.
Knowing that you need to buy a farm and you've got to raise £900,000 worth of capital in some way or another between 25 years old and 49 years old, makes it very focused.
Yeah. Have you always been goals orientated? When and how did that start for you, do you think?
No, I think I have been always goals oriented, but in the wrong direction. So, how do I get down to the local girls' school, or how do I drive my sporting requirements? I played sport at a reasonably high level, schoolboy level anyway.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I got married, began to have children, and understand what I wanted, or what we wanted, and actually having a goal which both husband and wife have, or both partners have agreed to or accepted, then half make life easier, because you may not agree on the step to achieve it, but you know where you're trying to get to.
Yeah, absolutely.
And make life easier.
Yeah. That's actually this is sort of going off on a tangent, but not as well. Let's just actually hone in on goal setting, and clearly this is something that you talk about with other farmers a lot. But what advice would you give in terms of goal setting and understanding where you're going? So,
because of what I do, I am now beginning to get quite a lot of emails, phone calls from young farmers that are wanting advice about business management.
Okay.
And when they phone, the first thing I don't talk about is business management. The first thing I want to know is, where are you going to be in 10 years' time?
Yeah.
What is it you want? Why are you farming? What makes a good farmer? Those sorts of questions. And not all the people that phone me up or I speak to are very keen on those questions.
Okay.
Because they're very personal to them, and they don't feel comfortable answering them particularly. So, where are you going to be in 10 years' time? Why do you want to farm? What is it about farming that drives you? And what is going to make you a good farmer?
Yeah.
And that question you can ask any farmer. How do you decide whether you are successful as a farmer or not, or how do you decide whether your neighbor is a successful farmer? Is based generally, the answer generally comes, well, there's no weeds, there's no thistles, there's no docks, the stock look good, the fencing look good, there's no weeds in the wheat or the barley. But actually, at the end of the day, there's only one measure, and it's a measure you can't see over the farm gate or the farm fence, is profitability. And without a goal and without understanding, how do you know what steps you're going to put in place if you don't know where you're going to?
Yeah.
It's like saying ready, fire, aim instead of ready, aim, fire.
Yeah. When it comes to goal setting, I'm quite goals orientated as well. But I know that probably up until fairly recently, I've only been thinking mostly about short-term goals. But which is why it's really refreshing to hear from you actually have that real grand vision, especially in farming, where most of the decisions you make have, at the very least, an impact of a year down the line. Or you're talking about multiple years in some cases, which I know for any tenant farmers listening is always a bit of a struggle, depending on the state of your tenancy and how many years you're looking ahead. But anyway, that was off on a bit of a tangent. But let's stick on the business side. And I know that when you're up in the Yorkshire Dales, you've already mentioned some of the other enterprises you have, but tell me about some of the diversifications and added value enterprises that you've done over the years. And perhaps I'm also interested if there are any that didn't work quite so well as the ones that work well as well.
So the first diversification was forced on us. We're sort of 1986, 87. We'd just invested huge amounts of money into setting up an outdoor pig herd, or as a tenant on what was called a Gladstone Bower, an 18-month rolling tenancy. So every 12 months it was renewed. But you could never really plan any heavy investment unless you could take it away with you.
Yep.
So we set up this outdoor pig herd, selling 3-week weaners. 3-week weaners selling at £23.50. 3.5-week weaners, £23.50. Within 6 months, they were down to £15.50.
Wow.
And that threw our cash flow way out.
Yeah.
And we had to rejig, and we were heavily geared. We were just starting up, 1 or 2 children at that point, just starting, 18.5% interest rates, because base was 15%. And suddenly we are in real trouble. And so what we did was we cut the 300 sows down to 100, and we finished everything outside. And we also, at that point, had to go through BSE. And because we were starting to finish pigs outside, we asked to have the BSE, the meat and bone meal, removed from our pig diets and all the growth promoters removed, and we just relied on the natural food that we fed to the pigs to act as a marketing offer to initially butcher shops in Surrey and the southeast, and eventually butcher shops and stores in London. So that was the first diversification. In fact, I don't use that word for us or for farms, really. It's about running a business.
Yeah.
It's about, you may want to add value, but you have a business with a set of assets, and you're trying to make those assets work as hard as they can for you. You're trying to sweat those assets. And what we as farmers forget is that we have this landscape, which is, in my view, the biggest asset that we have. And we should be sweating that asset as hard as we can, but at the same time being sustainable, not disadvantaging nature by doing that.
That's a really interesting point, actually, because you talk to a lot of farmers, and they'll talk about or diversified farmers, if you want to use that term, and they'll talk about core enterprise, and they'll talk about other enterprises. But actually, what you're saying there is actually, yeah, you have a single asset, which, and farmers across the generations have always been multi-enterprise, but it's about how you see that.
Yeah, and I'd go on from that and say, Ben, that when we go into a farm business, we set up a group, some management accounts, where we look at profit centers, not cost centers.
Okay.
So we split all the revenue that comes from the farm away from any support payments, any diversification payments, any FITs or renewable heat incentive. We split that all away. We need the farm to be in profit and not rely on cross funding from some of the diversification, the added value enterprises, unless that farm is operating properly and in profit, and in my view now before support.
Yeah.
Then you really have to ask yourself, why are you operating this business, this enterprise within your overall business?
Yeah. Oh.
And so when we work with, for example, dairy farmers that are going into to cheese, one of the discussions that takes place is the transition price from the farm, the milk price from the farm to the added value enterprise. What is that transition price? Because the added value, the cheese making, should not be buying the milk at market price. It should be buying it at the profitable price to that farm enterprise. Otherwise, there's a cross funding going on.
Can you pick an example of something that really worked for your situation?
Well, certainly we ended up with the outdoor pigs at one point in the late 80s selling the most expensive sausages in the country.
Wow.
Okay.
Incredible.
And there was a reason behind that, was because, and you can do this with beef and sheep as well, we created a standard pig. I'm talking business standards, not farming standards. And we knew the price that we had to charge for sausages if we could not turn any of that pig into other products like ham or bacon. So if we were left over with, we couldn't sell stuff in that week, we turned it into sausages, and we knew the price that we had to achieve for those sausages. And that created a base price for everything else. And we knew then that if we turned the pig into sausages but added ham into that, or pork loin or bacon, that was cream. Okay. We knew the break-even price, and you can do that with lamb and beef as well. So that was really critical. That set a standard for our future diversification businesses, or diversification enterprises, really. And then from there, I retrained in business management and marketing, and we bought this farm based around that in the Yorkshire Dales. And we very quickly started marketing our asset, the landscape in which our farm sat, for bed and breakfast, for self-catering, and the ready meals that went with that. And those ready meals create all sorts of benefits apart from additional revenue and additional profit. They say so much about you and your farm and the landscape in which you operate by the taste, the texture, the tenderness, how you package them, and so on and so forth. So understanding farming is a business at the end of the day. I had an email conversation with an arable farmer, and we were talking around everything, and he said, I actually lose money on the farm, but make a lot of money on my diversification, my added value businesses. So I said to him, so are you a farmer or are you a businessman? And his reply was, I'm a businessman that likes farming. Okay. And I said, I don't really think you're as good a businessman as you would like to be, because your farming enterprise is still losing you money.
Yeah.
Farming is a business and should be treated. And actually, the way business is taught in the London School of Economics or Cranfield or INSEAD in Paris is not the way we're taught as farmers when we go to college.
Yeah.
And we, until we understand that we are businessmen first and farmers second, we're going to be in trouble. And we've been allowed to get away with it because of the support mechanism over the last 60, 70, 80 years.
Hmm. When and why did you start your business consultancy?
Because the farm tenancy, the Gladstone Bower, was becoming less and less suitable as a vehicle for us to take our business forward. And the opportunity came to sell our pigs and the added value that we, at the end of that, we were selling into 60 butcher shops and into Harrods and Fortnums and Selfridges with hams and bacon and sausages and various other things too. And someone said, we'll buy it off you. And we said, fine, we'll take that. And I went and retrained in business management and marketing, and my wife went and retrained in graphic design.
Okay.
And that gave us, although we didn't really understand what it was going to give us, but what it did give us was a different view on running a farm business.
Yeah.
You know, how you manage your businesses. I've always done cash flows forever and a day. And when we started on cash flows, they were written. Yeah. And when you made a mistake, you had to rub it out or start again. The first cash flow, we still have the first cash flow that we did, which we submitted to NatWest in 1980, whatever it was, in ink, having been written in pencil first, so you could rub it out and redo bits. And if you made a mistake in June, you had to change it all the way through to the following 9 months that you had to change. So
do you remember the first time you completed an Excel spreadsheet?
Well, it wasn't Excel in those days. I can't remember what we were using. My father gave us a computer with not Excel but something else, and I can't remember what it was called. And learning that, and I found that really, really exciting.
Fantastic.
I mean, it's my 19 to 20-year-old self would be gobsmacked that I now find huge amounts of pleasure in cash flows. I mean, they are so exciting because they give you comfort. You can go to bed, whether the cash flow is looking good or bad, you can go to bed at night and sleep easier, if not very easily, but you can sleep easier because you know where you are and what you have to do to change it. If you don't do budgets, it's particularly in the next 10 years when BPS goes, if you're not doing proper budgets and monitoring them, there's going to be a problem for your business, in my view.
We'll come back to the business side a bit later, but I want to turn towards the Nature Friendly Farming Network. Why did you want to get involved with them?
Well, I didn't really know I did. To be quite honest, but I was asked to do a presentation on some of the work we've been doing on maximum sustainable output at the Welsh Real Farming Conference in Aberystwyth, and that must have been, I don't know, a couple of years ago, perhaps a bit more. And then I did that presentation, and I spoke to Martin Lyons, the UK chair of NFFN, and I signed up there and then, and one thing led to another. And so I end up where I am now. The maximum sustainable output, which again you may come back to, but the relationship between nature and farming is inextricable. And I can categorically say to you, which is going to be controversial, that unless a farm business is profitable before support, then nature will not be at its best. Now, farmers won't believe that, and conservationists won't believe that. But we've now done 80 farms, and every single farm, we've analysed 80 farms, and every single farm exhibits exactly the same characteristics. Unless a farm is profitable before support, nature will not be at its best.
Yeah. I mean, when we were recording the NFFN podcast, you suggested that farmers should be putting nature on their balance sheet and see it as a shareholder in the business. Can we just return to that? What do you mean by that?
That one of the reasons that nature and farming are inextricably linked is that farming is either the only industry or one of very few industries that rely on free issue. What do I mean by free issue? Every farm business will get free sunshine, free rain, free fertility, free grass. So there's an element of what you do as a farmer that you get for nothing. If farmers had to pay for that free issue, it would be expensive and would make farm businesses even less viable than they are now. So nature is giving us this. And what we should be doing is driving that asset, that free issue asset, making that as valuable as we can make it. And if someone in business gives you something, they generally expect something back in return. Nature doesn't expect anything back in return. It just expects that it's looked after and enhanced or worked in a way that doesn't disadvantage it. And so that makes nature a stakeholder, a shareholder in our farm business.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's well explained. We're going to broaden it out now, part of the show where we talk about broad farming issues. There are subtle differences in different parts of the UK. But what's your view on how farming policy in England, in England, seems to be shaping up?
How diplomatic do I have to
be? Up to you, Chris. This is a free thinking thought forum.
I think we have a real problem in that there is a move towards paying for natural capital, but there is no understanding of why that works, why that should happen. There is a move towards sustainable intensification. Those two things are mutually exclusive. You cannot have both. If nature is a stakeholder in your business, if you are receiving this free issue, which every farm does, then the whole of that field, for example, is receiving free issue. And if you disadvantage that free issue over the whole field, apart from the boundaries of that field where you've let nature take over, that is not helping nature, and nor is it helping your business. There is a sweet spot where farming and nature coincide, where nature is at its most at its best and farming is at its most profitable. If you have intensification in one part of the field and nature around the boundaries, it doesn't work. So the policy should be about making farms profitable, because if you do that, nature will by default get better and better and better. And so we haven't accepted that yet. This drive for production from all our leaders, whether it's from DEFRA, the RPA, Natural England, National Trust, NFU, CLA, they haven't yet grasped, because all their business models are predicated on support and driving production. And until we understand that nature, I keep on repeating myself, but nature and farming go together.
Based on that, are you concerned for the next few years? Without putting words into your mouth.
No, I'm very concerned, and because the mainstay of our landscape is farming. We have managed our landscape for over 1,000 years. And when we changed farming in that time, the changes were incremental and nature adapted We have farming as one natural system, nature as another natural system. And when you have two natural systems in terms of physics coming together, they try and even themselves out. There is an equilibrium between those two systems. So farming and nature in equilibrium until whenever it is, First World War and beyond, where there's a need to feed our country. And what we did was we went to an output at all costs, forced changes, fast changes, not the incremental ones that we've had. And so we haven't allowed nature to adapt to that. It now is, but not in a way that is beneficial to us. And until we understand that, as our leaders understand that, and start understanding the relationship between physics, mathematics, and economics, and nature fits into that, and farming fits into that, we've got a problem. And so, what you go back to your question, at the moment, of the 80 farms that we have seen, only 85% of those farms have any contribution to the bottom line after the variable costs and fixed costs are taken into account before support. Now, any farm business now who is contemplating what to do in the future needs to take out of their business planning, take out the support, take out the diversification income, and just look at the farm and see what is going on with that. Because too many farmers are relying on that support. And we have no farmers that can afford to pay themselves any money in salary or drawings, whatever, however you turn it, at all before support. Not one.
What's next for you on your 40 acres? What are your plans?
So the 40 acres are going to be wildflower meadows. We've ordered, arranged for green hay to come next year. We wanted it to come this year. We've got the Douglas fir, which form part of the pause site, going to be sorted out and felled over a period of 10 years, felled and thinned in places to bring back the ancient woodland plants that are there, and oaks and ash and hazel. But 40 acres isn't going to take up huge amounts of my time. So a lot of my time is now spent working with farms.
Brilliant.
Farm businesses. We've just taken on a couple of large projects with large numbers of farms. By the end of 2022, I will imagine that we'll have done and analysed probably nearer 200 farms. Brilliant. Than the 80 that we've got now. That's what's happening, because the MSO, this maximum sustainable output, is so critical to farm businesses.
We always finish the show with the same two questions for everyone. The first is, if you have a message for the public, what is it?
The public is to make sure that you really begin to understand where your food comes from. And when you move out into the countryside, to treat the countryside as though you owned it, and don't close gates, drop litter, don't drop litter, etc., etc., etc. But the understanding of where your food comes from is critical. The provenance, ask where it has come from.
Perfect. And finally, a message for farmers.
Don't wait for government to tell you what the support levels are going to be. Start operating now. You run a business that is very difficult and takes a long time to turn around. If you don't get the support levels that you need for your business to carry on the way that you are now, you're going to be in trouble.
Strong words. Thank you so much, Chris, for coming on the show. It's honestly been a real pleasure. And I feel like I've had some consultancy advice today, so I'm hoping the listeners do as well. We might as well give a plug. How do people get in touch with you?
Through NFFN, if you'd like to, Nature Friendly Farming Network, and my own business is Nethergill Associates, and there's a website you can go to.
Perfect. Thank you. Brilliant. That's all we've got time for today. But massive thanks to Chris for coming on the show. Next time, I'll be visiting Wakelins in Suffolk and speaking to Henrietta Inman. So I hope you can join me for that. But until then, have a great week.